everyone. Welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candace Marie. I'll be your astrologer this week. Thank you guys so much for joining me and happy Thursday. I hope you guys are doing well. Back at it with yet another video. And today we're going to take a look at Mercury's ingress into the sign of Leo. Do a little preview of the Mercury retrograde as well. If you guys like my content, you want to see more of it, make sure you subscribe to the channel, click the bell button below. I'm here every Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday using tarot and astrology to make sense of what's going on in the cosmos. Oh boy, get ready for this one, guys. It's gonna be colorful. We're gonna see some stuff kind of going on with this transit. So for those of you guys who are wondering, obviously, if you're ruled by Mercury, so if you are a Gemini or a Virgo rising, or if you have any Leo placements, in particular, I would say 3 to about 15, 16 degrees, you're going to be seeing Mercury retrograding through those degrees. I will do another Mercury retrograde as we get closer in July. I also cover this in my July horoscopes. But this is going to be quite a feisty, fiery transit. And from this 26th of June all the way through September 2nd, we will have Mercury in the fixed fire sign of Leo. This transit's all about bold communication, all right, and creative expression. And obviously, we're going to see a little bit of some of the classic Mercury retrograde kind of riffraff and mischief that can be kicking up. If you guys are watching this at the end of June, on the 26th of June when this goes live, we are pre-shadow right now. So the good news is that you actually have some really great transits pretty much the next 2 days as Mercury comes into trine with Saturn and Neptune in Aries to set things in motion, sign contracts, agree to things, plan travel, do all the stuff that you have to do before Mercury hits that 4 degrees in early July, and it's gonna go into the retrograde shadow. So in this episode, we're gonna kind of talk about the themes of Mercury and Leo. We're gonna talk about why it's tied to the sun transits and the significance of some of the degrees it's going to be hitting, along with the Sabian symbols. We're also gonna talk a little bit about why this is gonna give us deja vu. Mercury is connected to the South Node in Virgo, but last year we had a Mercury retrograde that went from Virgo back into Leo, and we just completed a Mars retrograde earlier this spring that took place in similar degrees. So I'm confident that you guys have already done a few kind of rewinds and reworks through this part of your chart. If you guys stay tuned to the end, I will give you guys all the key aspects, what to watch for, as well as my predictions and themes for the 12 rising signs. I'll also share some tips on how to work with this energy and who's going to be most affected. So let's go ahead and roar into it. Now, let's talk first Mercury in a nutshell. Mercury is about communication. It can be about gadgets, transportation, anything revolving around transactions, media, business, all of that stuff. And Mercury transits are kind of fun to watch this year because they move pretty quickly, and obviously there is a direct correlation and tie to the South Node in Virgo. So it's going to be about kind of getting out of our way, rethinking, reworking, maybe being less critical, making changes to our health as well as our schedule, and obviously dealing with the past. So Mercury transits can kind of connect to the past in some way. I think that's going to make this particular Mercury transit a little bit more prominent, especially during the Mercury retrograde, because we are going to be finding that stuff from the past is coming back up. Now, I think Mercury in Leo is all about speaking from the heart and really shining when it comes to our words and embracing creativity. So if you're somebody who wants to reconnect to the inner child, rework some personal kind of pleasure projects, kind of rework something about your hobbies or self-expression, getting back into dating, these can be some of the themes that we see with Mercury retrograde in this sign. Now, it won't be until the 17th of July that we see the retrograde. And like I said, it's going to be retrograde until about August 11th. And remember, there is a pre and a post shadow. So even though those are the 3 weeks that we're going to see Mercury retrograde, we're going to see stuff kick up on the pre-shadow, especially as Mercury opposes Pluto. We're going to see stuff kick up on the post-shadow because when Mercury goes direct, it's still within a 2-degree opposition of Pluto and Aquarius. So that's going to bring up some major, I think, jaw-dropping news and themes revolving around Mercury or, Leo figures. So think like celebrities, leaders, anything in regards to military leaders, as well as stuff kind of connected to individual, creatives. It can be themes kind of connected to also the trauma dramas that can kind of go on in our love lives. So we can see some big changes happening for us personally and collectively because Aries, is going to be tied into some of the trines with Saturn and Neptune. And Leo is a very much I create, kind of bold energy. So we'll go through all of the aspects kind of one by one so you can see it. But something to think about is that until we're finished with the Mercury retrograde, which won't be closer until, the mid-August period, we can see that the Mercury retrograde shadow and the retrograde in itself can bring miscommunications. So we can see like tech glitches or delays in creative projects, but also I think, like I said, a chance to revisit and refine our creative self-expression. So expect old ideas to come up, potentially old, romantic partners or potentially even past creative ventures that might resurface for closure or reinvention. And I think the Leo energy is really encouraging confidence. We just want to watch for arrogance or drama that can kind of come up in conversations. Now, the transits are really important, both looking at some of the aspects that Mercury is going to be making, as well as Mercury's tie to Mars's current kind of trek through Virgo, where it's trying to get organized and it's trying to be productive. The South Node, where we're dealing with the past, as well as the Sun, will now be the ruler of Mercury, unlike the Moon, which has been kind of happening for the last couple of weeks. So we'll be watching what's kind of going on with the Sun. Honestly, I think the Sun conjunct Jupiter right off the bat still can be quite positive for the Mercury-Leo transit. We can be a little bit more bold and optimistic. Maybe we can overcome some of the challenges with the opposition of Pluto. I'm also really liking some of the trines to Saturn and Neptune because I think that's going to provide some personal clarity as well as inspiration. Anyway, so why is the Sun tied to Mercury? Well, essentially, the Sun is the ruler of Leo, so it's considered the dispositor as Mercury is going through this sign. Mercury never really strays too far from the Sun anyway, astrologically speaking. So as the planet of communication and intellect is going through Leo, we're still looking at the Sun in Cancer, where we're having to kind of be in tune with emotional matters, home and family matters as well. So while Mercury is in Leo, it's going to amplify the Sun's kind of vibes as it's going through Cancer. And eventually you will see going into July, it'll actually segue into Leo, where Leo season is going to be starting around the 22nd of July. And we will see this be a little bit more bold, a little bit more theatrical when it comes to communication. And we'll see this synergy between Mercury and the Sun really creating a spotlight for self-expression, particularly during the Mercury retrograde, where we're asked to kind of reflect on how authentically we are sharing our voice. Now, something you're going to see is that when Mercury turns retrograde, it's going to be at 15 degrees. And I don't talk about this as much, but I think that it is a prominent degree. Whenever we see planets at the 15 degrees of the fixed sign, so Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, or Aquarius, that is the halfway point through that particular sign. So this is actually considered a critical degree, and it will amplify the energy of that sign. We know that 15 has that connection and correlation with Gemini, so it's interesting that Mercury will be there. And I feel like it's going to be a powerful moment for breakthroughs or challenges in communication, creativity, or potentially even leadership. So it's going to kind of feel like the universe is saying, like, get real about how you express yourself. This degree resonates with themes of courage and authenticity, and it's really urging us to kind of align our words with our heart. So watch for some of those pivotal moments and conversations that are going to be kicking up right around the time the retrograde is going to begin. Now, this is known as a midpoint energy, so it's kind of like the peak expression of that particular sign. And fixed signs are really known for stability, determination, and intensity. So when we see Mercury retrograding at this degree, these traits are very amplified, and we're going to see it really be about embodying the core essence of Leo. So it's like kind of like being at the heart of the sign's energy where the power is most concentrated. I also think that, when I think about 15 degrees of Leo particularly, it's about radiating creativity and self-expression. Now, there is some themes to, the midpoint. It can represent the energy of a square. So these particular fixed points in the fixed degrees can create a cross in the sky. And when planets are sitting at these degrees, they create powerful kind of energetic grids, and it amplifies the themes of stability versus change. And it's also about personal versus the collective. We see that a lot with retrogrades in Leo, especially in opposition to Pluto and Aquarius. So when I think about this degree, I think it's really kind of connecting to significant turning points for the collective, major pivotal shifts that are going to be taking place, especially when it comes to life's foundational structures. Now, when a planet like Mercury, for example, is sitting at this degree and it retrogrades, it's signaling a moment where communication and self-expression really demands our attention, often bringing breakthroughs and challenges or faded conversations. So the fixed nature of this particular degree, I think, is going to be suggesting persistence in addressing some of these themes, even among some of the retrograde delays. Now, when we think about the retrograde in itself, it's going to be starting at 15 degrees. So I'll read to you guys the Sabian symbol for 16 because we round up. And then it will retrograde back to about 4 degrees of Leo. So we're going to look at 5 degrees of the Sabian symbol of Leo and also 16. And 5 degrees of Leo is a rock formation at the edge of a precipice. So in a nutshell, this particular symbol where the retrograde shadow is going to begin, this is also the same place that the Mercury retrograde is going to end when it goes direct, is about invoking like the symbol of being at a crossroads. And I think it's about requiring courage to face challenges or even take risks. Now, during Mercury's direct motion at 5 degrees, around 5 degrees during the retrograde, post-retrograde period, it's going to be about grounding our creative ideas with resilience and commitment. So think like a rock enduring the elements. And this is about applying this particular degree to finalizing any projects, any commitments, or anything creatively with confidence. When the retrograde begins, it's going to start at 16 degrees of Leo, around 16 degrees, 15, 16. And the degree for this is sunshine just after the storm. So this symbol is tied to Mercury's retrograde station at 15, and it suggests clarity and renewal after chaos. So it's a reminder that the retrograde hiccups can lead to a brighter kind of insights, and it's about using the energy to revisit creative blocks and feel like a burst of new, fresh inspiration. So pay close attention if you have anything. I would say 3, 4, 5 degrees of Leo, 14, 15, 16 degrees of Leo, you're going to be impacted by the station or the retrograde. Now, something that this kind of reminded me of, because I kind of feel like at this point in 2025, I'm like, man, we've had a lot of like things going on in the area of Leo. So if you were to go back to summer of 2024, we actually had a Mercury retrograde that took place in Virgo. I'll show it to you guys. But Mercury retrograded back into Leo. So this might feel like faintly familiar for what happened in summer of 2024. So it was right around the beginning of August that we saw Mercury turn retrograde, and it started its retrograde in Virgo in its domicile, and it retrograded back into Leo. So in my mind, when we see a planet retrograde in one sign and go back into another, it's kind of like the universe's way of saying, hey, there's something here that you need to kind of finalize or complete or wrap up before you move forward. This was before the South Node went into Virgo. This is before we started having eclipses recently in Virgo. So you might want to put on your thinking caps, think about what was going on and what was happening for you in August of last year. We know that when we had this retrograde, Mercury came into conjunction with the sun. So we saw a similar kind of cazimi, albeit at different degrees, but still we saw a cazimi that happened in Leo around the 3rd week of August last year. So that particular house where you saw Mercury retrograde through, you're going to have a similar Mercury retrograde. You're going to see a similar cazimi, different aspects with other planets, but still it might kind of feel like deja vu. Equally, in this last couple of months, we saw Mars go retrograde through Leo. So to kind of take you guys back, let's look at the Mars retrograde. This retrograde started in December of 2024. And, Mars went retrograde. It started in Leo. It went back into Cancer. And we saw right around the beginning of January 2025, Mars come into a second opposition with Pluto. Okay, this is important because Mars made several oppositions to Pluto in Aquarius. We saw it in right at the end of December, beginning of January, and then we saw it again in April. Obviously, tension, pressure, conflict. There's also been some kind of like unfortunate situations and things that are kind of like deadly, Mars-Pluto things. And Mercury is going to make similar aspects. We will actually see Mercury still technically in an opposition to Pluto when it goes direct around 4 degrees. So it's going to kind of bring up maybe where there was some action or there was some hastiness or there was some hostility or there was some conflict that maybe got kicked up around the beginning of 2025, be that in January or in April, and now we're kind of getting more information in regards to what happened. The action, Mars, that leaders, celebrities, romantic partners, or even us creatively have taken, and now we're reorganizing, reformulating, and kind of getting new information. So Mars retrograde stirred up some issues, I think, around passion, maybe some action and some ego issues, really asking us to reassess our drives. Now here we come into what's going to be a Mercury transit, and the Mercury retrograde will be fully in Leo. So it's not going to go into another sign. So let's look at that. And when we get into the Mercury retrograde, it's going to start around July 17th, 2025. So there's that 15 degrees, and it's going to retrograde back to about 4 degrees. Now, my thought on this is like Mercury retrograde going retrograde in the same sign, it's going to be revisiting some of the themes through communication and thought processes. So for example, if Mars retrograde kind of highlighted some of the conflicts in creative projects, romantic relationships, or out in the world, Mercury retrograde is now going to bring opportunities to maybe renegotiate, maybe clarify some of those issues. And I think both transits in Leo really emphasize authentic self-expression. So now we can really reflect on how our actions, Mars, and words, Mercury, align with our personal truth. Now, some key aspects and their meanings, I want to really kind of break this down, and I'm going to go aspect by aspect, and I'm actually going to show it to you from the time that Mercury enters into Leo. So that's going to be closer to around today on the 26th. All right, so Mercury enters Leo. Later today, it's going to hit that 0 degree point. And to be honest with you guys, I hope you're paying attention, take notes, because as the moon goes into Leo, it's going to activate the sun, okay? So we've got Mercury and the moon in Leo. Well, the sun is still conjunct Jupiter. You will see later today into tomorrow that Mercury and the moon trining Saturn and Neptune can mean two different things. One, great pre-shadow communication opportunities. If Mercury is the mind, Leo is the heart, Saturn is commitment, Neptune is going to be about our inspiration or intuition. Pay attention to your dreams tonight, okay? Pay attention to your gut feelings, pay attention to your intuition, whatever is coming up for you. Maybe you pull a few cards, maybe you just have a vibe about something, I don't know. But it's going to help you really tune into yourself, get clarity, and figure out how to best create, how to best love, how to best communicate and express yourself. I would use today and tomorrow into the 27th to communicate and really put some plans in motion. Now, if you have to, for example, sign a contract, commit to something, you have to buy something, you have to make some big move, today and tomorrow are probably going to be the best aspects pre-shadow to be able to do that, because we see Mercury and Saturn kind of aligning where there could be some commitment of matters of communication. The moon is highlighting that as well. The other way of looking at this is, especially, and I've said this several times, but especially if you have any personal placements from about, let's say, 3 degrees of Leo to about 16 degrees of Leo, Mercury will go through that retrograde, and it's still when it stations will trine Saturn and Neptune. So kind of like going back a little bit to the Sabian symbol where it was saying, now we have the sunshine, literally Leo, after the storm. It can be saying, okay, we've gone through some of like the cosmic wish-wash of the retrograde, and now we have clarity, personal clarity, trines to Saturn and Neptune, awareness and renewal after the chaos. So yeah, maybe we actually have to go through the Mercury retrograde to get the insights, maybe to revisit our past joys, creative projects, better connect romantically or to our inner child, and to better express ourselves. So there's some nice aspects that you're going to actually see right when we're kind of coming into Mercury's ingress, and also when Mercury goes direct. So one of the first big aspects that you're going to see outside of Saturn trine Mercury and Neptune trine Mercury, which by the way, you're only going to get exact right now. It'll be too short to be an exact trine when Mercury goes direct, so you might as well kind of work with it while you can right now. Anyway, the first real big aspect you're going to see is going to be when Mercury comes into an opposition with Pluto. Truth be told, I think we're going to be feeling it, honestly, from like later today into tomorrow, because the moon in Mercury, which is going to represent our emotions and our intuition or our ability to kind of like analyze things, is being challenged by Pluto. So you might be feeling that intensity now, but it won't make an exact opposition until Mercury hits about 3 degrees. So that looks like that's going to be happening very early in the morning on June 29th. So in just a couple of days, Mercury opposes Pluto. Now, I talked about this on my Astro Weather, so I don't want to like beat a dead horse, but something that's interesting about this day is that Uranus is kind of connected to Pluto, and we see the moon square Uranus. And then we also see Mercury in opposition to Pluto. So this is right when the Mercury-Pluto opposition first hits. Now, we will see this, obviously, the 28th, 29th, 30th. And this isn't an intense period. This really brings like struggles or transformation through communication, data, information, and details. Remember, Mercury is connected to the South Node. So this is about something breaking down. I really think that we're going to see some major telecommunications issues. 3s deal with Gemini. It does deal with like communication networks, cell phones. It can also be connected to internet outages or issues with technology. If you guys think back to what happened actually last summer when we had the Mercury retrograde, I was like, something happened. I remember what happened. I had to kind of like rack my brain. Well, last year, around July 19th, when Mercury was in the, I believe it was the pre-shadow period, we saw the major outage, the blue screen of death, where Windows had its huge outage, where it caused like all kinds of issues connecting to the update with CrowdStrike software, which triggered like widespread system crashes, right? We saw this affect millions of Windows PC users and servers globally. The outage actually impacted industries like the airlines, banks, hospitals, as well as media, and it had an estimated 8.5 million systems affected. I attribute a lot of that to like the square to Uranus maybe, and other things that we kind of saw happening in the mix, but this is giving me deja vu of what happened last summer. So my eyes will be glued on the 29th of June because I'm watching the moon come into Virgo later in the day after Mercury has opposed Pluto, and this Mercury is going to get super active with moon conjunct Mars. So we're probably going to see some kind of telecommunications issues with transportation, problems with internet, all kinds of stuff. So watch for that. Obviously, I hope I'm wrong. I think this might also be potentially used, to uncover hidden motives or information. There could be some major drops or information revolving around military mobilization. And obviously whether or not things are factual. I like the trine to Saturn and Neptune. I think individuals are going to be more cautious and aware of where they're getting their news from, what information is coming out. Equally, I think about how this opposition is really pushing us on an individual level to focus on collective truth. So watch out for clashes between personal expression and group dynamics and use this to really uncover hidden motives if you can. Now, I've said it several times, but the trine to Saturn and Neptune, I think, are beautiful. It's a harmonious aspect, obviously, and it really blends discipline as well as intuition with bold communication. So it's great for structured creative projects and spiritual insights. We will only see that exact right around the time that you guys are seeing this video, so like the 26th into the 27th when Mercury trines. But when Mercury goes direct, right towards the end of the retrograde, it's still technically going to be in a trine at about 4 degrees. However, by the time we get to August 11th, Saturn and Neptune are retrograde. So that's why I really encourage doing a lot of your preparatory Mercury retrograde stuff actually the next couple of days while Saturn and Neptune are direct, because we're going to have more clarity and we're going to be better grounded. Now, we will see a sextile that will be happening also to Uranus in Gemini. So that's kind of cool. We get to talk about that now. And that's actually setting up, sorry guys, I'm all over the place. That's actually setting up all over the place. Where am I? There we go. There we go. Okay, so when we look at Mercury in a sextile to Uranus, it's kind of opening the door to new ideas, ingenious, kind of ways of thinking. Obviously, right off the bat, Uranus is at 29 degrees, but as you see Uranus come into Gemini, and then Mercury will retrograde back, it will start coming into a sextile with Uranus by a couple of degrees. So around August 8th, through mid-August, you'll see about 3 degree sextile which is kind of sparkly. It brings sudden insights or innovative ideas. Obviously, Uranus and Gemini is when it comes to media, when it comes to websites, when it comes to information, when it comes to learning, language, travel. And Uranus and Gemini really loves experimenting with communication. So it might be about new ways to express yourself. I think there's going to be new social media on the horizon. I think there's going to be new ways of being able to create and share information or relay information. There might be all kinds of new built-in things to apps and social media sites, making it easier for us to be able to connect and communicate. In particular, I think about messaging. So we might be finding that messaging or trading options might be kind of coming online to certain online programs. Uranus also can be about, shocking and surprising things, news or things that are kind of unexpected or unpredictable. Obviously, we have seen with some of the retrogrades in Leo that there has been some kind of rocking and rolling going on in the market. So, Leo does rule anything that's speculative. So it can be the stock market, it can be gambling, it can be anything kind of connecting to risks and taking chances. So likely you'll find that there may be like some new ways of being able to trade or exchange or like get information about what's going on in the market through social media websites. We will probably still see some more market volatility that's going to be happening as well. Just kind of thinking about some of the angles that this is going to be making in the New York Stock Exchange chart, as well as several cryptocurrency charts as well. So watch for that. And then obviously the grand finale is always the cazimi. So the cazimi will be the moment that Mercury and the Sun align. And what's interesting is when it aligns, it's going to be exactly at 9 degrees. Okay, so the cazimi is whenever it's within, some people say a degree, some people say about 17 minutes, but I'm looking at the moment that they align, and it's going to be at 9. So let me get this exact here, so you guys can see that. Oh, am I going the wrong way? Sorry, guys. Come on, come on, come on. All right, so it's going to be exactly at 9 right here. Come on. There we go. On, looks like it's going to be July 31st, 2025, and it'll be around 6:45 p.m. You may feel the effects of the cazimi all day. I think this one's going to be very strong because the sun is in its home sign. I also think that it's going to be very strong because it's also feeding off of the most recent Mars South Node conjunction. Also, Mars will be reactivating the eclipse that we had in Virgo earlier in March of this year. But the cazimi is that moment where you're in the halfway point for the Mercury retrograde, and there is an epiphany or an awareness or something that kind of opens up where you're like, oh, what I've been missing, I found, or what I didn't know, now I figured out, or I got that document I've been waiting on, or, if you don't know what the Mercury retrograde is about, this is where you become aware of it. So it's interesting that the Sabian symbol for 9 degrees of Leo, because it's exact, is glass blowers shape beautiful forms with their controlled breathing. So the meaning here is the symbol really suggests that it's that of art and creation through focus, skill, and effort. So skill, obviously, a lot of skill to be able to blow glass. You have to be really intentional with how you're using your breath if you're going to be kind of creating something. And it requires precision, right? Control and a delicate balance of force or breath and finesse. So it's going to be mirroring the themes of Leo's self-expression, creativity, and mastery. It also suggests that beauty and meaningful outcomes emerge when we channel our energy with discipline and purpose. So the act of shaping glass kind of implies like transformation, which we see throughout the Mercury retrograde, taking a raw material and creating something unique, much like the drive to kind of shine authentically like Leo does. It's also at a 9, so it's going to be a little sparkly, a little optimistic. It's got like a Jupiter kind of flair to it. And it can mean that this is a really significant moment or a prominent moment where leaders are speaking up. They're kind of roaring and they have something to say. In particular, Leo can deal with like military leaders. It can deal with like leaders of countries. It can deal with kings. It can deal with royalty. So I'm curious to see what kind of happens there. I'm also curious to see what happens here when Mars is conjunct the South Node with the Moon around July 28th. where there is something that gets triggered that's pushing or like forcing a leader to kind of come up and make a statement or have something or kind of like address people about what has gone on or where there has potentially been some military action, or is like addressing maybe even like military personnel. So you're going to see that around the end of July as well. And that'll actually kind of continue. You'll actually probably see that pretty much from July 20th until you see this transit with the moon around the 28th. I know that's a big window, but I'm really looking at the connection between Mercury and the sun, as well as Mars and the South Node. So there's going to be something really prominent, I think, happening at the end of July around those topics. So on a personal level, I think that this symbol is really kind of encouraging all of us to really harness our creative energy with focus and patience. I think that the universe would not be giving us multiple retrogrades in the same part of our chart if it really wasn't trying to get our attention. Whether it's a project or a performance or a personal goal, this is about success being really about controlled effort rather than kind of scattered enthusiasm. So it's a reminder to kind of like breathe life into your passions intentionally. On a collective level, this could mean that for groups or society, it points to the power of collective creativity and collaboration with other people, where shared vision and skill can really produce long-lasting and beautiful results. It may also really highlight the need for careful handling of volatile situations, so think like hot glass, to achieve harmony. Now, during the retrograde, I think that this particular degree is about revisiting creative projects or communication styles and refining how we express our unique ideas or voices, and really ensuring that our words and ideas are being shaped into something that is enduring as well as authentic. Now, something else to kind of think about, this is one of the final kind of aspects, is that we will see towards the end of the transit, when Mars goes into Libra, which is going to have its own volatility in its own right, Mars will be making an opposition, to Saturn and Neptune, and we've got a kind of debilitated Mars in Libra. But Mercury, as it's stationing and comes back into opposition with Pluto, where there is some tension, like at the beginning of the transit at the end of June, it will start sextiling Mars. So where we're becoming more clear about our romantic lives, our creative projects, our children, our relationships, our personal joy and hobbies, it's going to help us take action in relationships or in regards to relationships to kind of go after what we want or sever the ties if necessary. It's pretty common when Mercury goes retrograde in Leo. We see a lot of like squabbles in romantic relationships and casual relationships. And it's also pretty common when we see, planets in Aries in opposition to planets in Libra, that there is a little bit of like a battle of the sexes that are going on. So what's fascinating is that Mercury is going to turn direct right around the time that it's in a sextile with Mars, okay? And like, look at this. So even the next day, when Mercury and Mars are sextiling, the moon goes through Aries, conjunct Saturn and Neptune, and trines Mercury. It's a lot of like getting the individuals on board with what the heart wants. And even if that ruffles some feathers or creates some issues with, diplomacy or alliances, like, the heart wants what the heart wants. So as Mercury is turning direct with that sextile to Mars in Libra, it's going to boost diplomatic communication and collaboration, but I also feel like it's helping individuals tune into what they need. I don't think it's going to be as positive for resolving conflicts in a charming way as maybe it would if we had an unexpected Mars in Libra. I'm not as optimistic about that, to be honest with you guys. I'm very conflicted about this opposition. I've been looking at it for quite some time because Mars rules Saturn and Neptune, because Venus is connected to Mars and it's conjunct Jupiter. I think in some ways what we're going to realize in August is that out in the world, some of the diplomatic stuff that's going on, some of the alliances that are shifting or breaking off or changing are actually things that could be really beneficial for certain countries when it comes to, their ability to really thrive in terms of relationships with, the common people, in terms of, resources and, financial upward swings for certain countries. Like there could be a lot of rejoicing because they're finally breaking off and like not supporting certain allies. And that's just kind of like mundane general astrology. In a personal world, it can also mean that there are some people who are recognizing and realizing that the people they've been aligning themselves with, business partners, clients, therapists, spouses, romantic partners, friends, if it's not really good for them, or if it's actually detrimental to their own personal vision and growth, that the path of being alone but being happy or being fulfilled or being enough is actually going to be better than being in a relationship which feels like it's war-torn and confrontational and it's conflict and uphill battle, or maybe not authentic. So there will be a lot of like the spirit rejoicing, over what the heart actually had to kind of break up with. And we will see this. You guys will see this in August of this year. Anyway, more as we get closer to that. I'm still a little torn because it feels like we just can't get a break. Jupiter going into Cancer, boom, immediately squared Saturn and Neptune, right? Even the solstice, right? The summer solstice immediately squared Saturn and Neptune. Now we have this once in like a 12-year transit where exalted Jupiter meets with Venus, and it just so happens to be the ruler of a debilitated Mars in opposition to Saturn and Neptune. It's just like the cosmic jam band in the sky just has like a real sick sense of humor. But once again, what separates will actually make us stronger. I read a quote recently that I saw on X, and it was saying like, muscles have to be torn in order to grow and to be built back like stronger. And so I look at the Mars-Saturn opposition, which is pretty common. I've seen that for a lot of clients that have, torn muscles, sprained something, pulled something, whatever. And in order to bounce back, right, it takes time to heal. And then also there's like a lot of physical therapy and like building yourself back, but you can come back stronger than you ever were. Anybody who goes through weightlifting or training, knows exactly how that goes. My point being is that I look at some of these aspects where I'm like, yeah, it's going to hurt. It's kind of like ripping off the bandage. And some of us might feel like, we're tearing some muscles or there's something that we're having to kind of tear apart or break away from. But that's ultimately what's going to really liberate us, give us more abundance, give us more happiness, joy, better relationships. And it's exceptionally good, I think, for our personal kind of home countries with where we are living. So we might be shocked and surprised by some of the changes in alliances that are kind of going on. And then finally, I keep thinking about this as Mercury enters shadow with some of these South Node aspects. Like I said, on the 29th of June, watch for some of these aspects. I think that Mercury is going to be doing its thing, and it's going to be kind of kicking off the Mercury storm. Now, one other thing I wanted to show you guys really quick. Obviously, you guys know how this might be kind of impacting you individually, revisions in creative projects, contracts, public speaking, but out in the world collectively, this transit is really screaming that there is going to be major debates revolving around leadership, okay? This is going to make an opposition to the United States moon, depending on which chart you look at. It's also going to be really highlighting, Zelensky's chart. It's going to be highlighting J.D. Vance's chart. It's going to be highlighting Israel's chart. So these are going to be some of the main players, and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. But I think that the debates revolving around leadership are going to be huge, especially with the oppositions to Pluto. I think it's going to be about whether or not we have honest, authentic, brave leaders, major changes and segues with the media, especially individuals recognizing and realizing where the media is creating a lot of like chaos and confusion and also like tension. Obviously, we see that with the opposition. And really kind of seeing power struggles, especially when it comes to public discourse. Also public disclosure about, misinformation or things revolving around manipulation, and major revelations, I think, about influential figures. Now, it's a time to really kind of question narratives as well as kind of speak our truth boldly and thoughtfully. But let me show you guys some of the charts that I was kind of talking about, because I was like, oh, this is going to get interesting for a couple of people. Oops. So this one. So this is Zelensky's chart. Obviously, Prime Minister of Ukraine. But if you guys look at his chart, he's got Sun and Venus in Aquarius, right? So he's under a Pluto transit. Pluto is just kind of beaming on him right now, where it's like a cosmic pressure cooker revolving around his personal power, his control. Obviously, the sun rules the fourth house. It's the dispositor of Mars, the moon, and Saturn. So relations, maybe Sun Venus revolving around leaders in foreign lands, and his faith, his philosophy, his belief systems revolving around power and control. Now, he's got his chart cooked just with Pluto being next to his Sun and his Venus, but it's also been in an opposition to Mars. So there's been some very intense, heated kind of debates going on revolving around, how he's leading, which is quite frankly very dangerous. Just having Pluto on the Sun is enough, but Pluto in opposition to Mars, my God. So we look at what's going to happen here, in particular, right around the Moon Mercury conjunction on his Mars in opposition to Pluto. So I'm thinking like, what's going to happen around the 27th that's going to put him back in the headlines in some way, shape, or form, especially the third house, which could be like the mouthpiece. So we're going to see Mercury oppose his Sun and his Venus, and then we're going to see it go retrograde in his third house. So this could mean that there is a renegotiation. There is a willingness to come back to the table. After all, he's Gemini, rising. So this could be coming back into the news, coming back into the headlines, coming back into a negotiation. Certainly it's going to be a fierce one because you're going to see a new moon that's going to be conjunct his Mars, which is going to have him vocalizing, taking action, communicating, potentially even beating the war drums. And then you're going to see this Mercury retrograde cazimi in his third house. So is there going to be a renegotiation coming for Zelensky revolving around, the end of the Ukraine war? I mean, there's been a back and forth about the mineral deal. There's been a back and forth revolving around the end of the war. Certainly there's a lot of tension with Pluto in opposition to his Mars and this retrograde revolving around opposing forces. We're gonna see that. I do feel like he is going to be one of the main players, to be honest with you guys. And any which way you slice it, with some of the transits that are going on, because it's directly tied to his whole sign fourth house Mars transit, South Node Mars is going to be about whether or not he's giving up territory, whether or not he's giving up land, if he's actually, willing to make the necessary sacrifices to Russia. And I'm not here to kind of politic. It's literally the astrology. So I wonder what's going to kind of happen with that. He will be somebody who's definitely going to be making headlines for the immediate next year. As Pluto is coming into conjunction with his Sun and with his Venus, I do not think he's long for this world. Obviously, I'm not hoping that, but I think that we're going to see some pretty dramatic things happening with Zelensky. Somebody else that whose chart really gets kind of lit up with this retrograde is J.D. Vance. And this has got me thinking and kind of wondering as I look at his chart, because the retrograde is so prominent as the cazimi is happening on his Sun in the 12th house, his chart ruler, what he is going to be dealing with exactly. We're going to see the retrograde actually begin around 14 degrees, where it's going to be conjunct his Vesta and his Juno. So it can be more correlated and connected to his alliances, his partnerships. Obviously, if you guys don't know, he's the Vice President of the United States for President Donald Trump. What decisions or agreements he's making behind the scenes, who his allies are, but more importantly, who his enemies are, because the 12th house is going to rule hidden enemies. Financial dealings, negotiations, as Mercury rules his second house of money and resources and 11th house of goals, as well as his allies and his networks. But Mercury will retrograde, and it's going to come into conjunction with his Sun. So the cazimi is going to be very close to his Sun. Obviously, that'll be baked into his solar return chart, so that could be a really prominent time for his voice being heard, for him being recognized, stepping out of the shadows, stepping into the forefront. But can it mean that there is going to be a change revolving around his status? I wonder. Uranus is coming into conjunction with his North Node. Some radical sudden change revolving around his leadership. The opposition to Pluto in his 6th house, I think, is about navigating some stuff that's going on with the day-to-day, with scheduling, health, as well as maybe his aides. And you're going to be seeing that he is going to be another major character in the midst of this. I'm wondering what it's going to be. President Trump is also a late degree Leo rising. Obviously we're going to see the retrograde happening in his 12th house as well. Vance has conjunctions to, some of Vance's placements. So maybe that's worth kind of looking at. But I think this is about maybe negotiations, agreements behind closed doors suddenly becoming a little bit more visible. It might be like they're debating and talking about what direction they're going in terms of some of the relationships they're having with foreign leaders. It's happening in the 12th house. And some of the tension revolving around, is that going to trigger something that's going to cause some bigger problems? So we'll be watching that. Let's look at Trump's chart too, because I didn't, but I know that Vance has stuff conjunct him. And Donald Trump is 29 degrees rising. Oh, well, there it is. It's his Pluto. So the Mercury Cazimi is going to be conjunct Trump's Pluto. I mean, this sounds crazy, but is Vance going to replace Trump? I mean, I need to do some more research on this before I make a prediction like that, because even for me, that seems a little wild. But, certainly Pluto is one of the heavy hitters in astrology, especially in the natal chart. And Trump's got it at a 10, so it's going to represent his power, his political power, his control, and in the 12th house, it's like his power is kind of kept behind closed doors. The big, powerful decisions he's going to be making, clearly Vance is going to be involved in this in some way, is stuff that's going to be decided behind closed doors, strategy. So similar to what's gone on with the Mars retrogrades, we saw he was calling for peace and was trying to kind of negotiate a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. Perhaps maybe it's about that. It doesn't necessarily have to be about things that are about consistent kind of, current wars. Mercury is going to deal with money and resources and the relationship revolving around trade, especially with other countries. So those of you guys who don't know, or if you've been living under a rock, Trump's 90-day, tariff kind of pause, it's going to end in August. So we're going to see that 90 days is up. What's going to happen? Are they going to renegotiate with China? Is there going to potentially be an extension to that pause? Or are we going to be seeing that tariffs are coming back and this is going to be impacting international trade? They're in turn making some big changes revolving around who holds the power. We'll see. Things are starting to get really interesting, but I can tell you that JD Vance and Trump are going to definitely get very much highlighted in this particular retrograde. So I'll be really watching what the Cazimi is, what's kind of going on there. And obviously, I got to do it. We have to look at Israel's chart, because Israel's chart is also lit up like a Christmas tree. So, there we go, sorry. So for Israel's chart, I've got the Libra rising with the moon in Leo and the sun in Taurus. Now, the Mercury retrograde, is going to be happening over some pretty prominent parts of this chart. It's going to be happening in Israel's 10th house. So it's going to be about leadership. It's going to be about control. It's going to be about power. Obviously, Mercury is going to represent either foreign powers. It could also represent losses. The 12th house is connected to losses. And it's also going to be connected to things that are either international, or it can be about loss of power, loss of belief, loss of faith. This is a pretty significant retrograde. Retrograding right over Saturn, so it's going to be about governance over the land, right over Pluto, where it can represent some very powerful changes in leadership or in government structure. And it is going to station right on top of the moon, which is going to be the 10th house lord. 10th house is going to literally be about the power of the country. And, recently when they exercised their most recent launches into Iran, it was I think that it was called Operation Lion Rising or something like that. And it was literally when we were starting to see the Mars return that it was having at 28 degrees Regulus, right? Which just so happens to be President Trump's ascendant. So this kind of fiery, feisty back and forth. I mean, you go back to the Mercury retrograde we had last year. There was a back and forth that he was having with him, and it's still kind of going on. This is going to be something to watch. This is really going to be something to watch, because this is going to pack so much more of a punch with Mars in the South Node being in Israel's whole sign 12th house. To me, this seems to imply that Israel is going to suffer losses. And this is not me politicking, because honestly, I don't want to see war. I don't want to see anybody fighting. I don't want to see any of this stuff, because it just stresses everybody out and it just creates more perpetual hostility and anger and hate. But the reality of the situation is it's not looking good for Israel's chart. And it's making me feel like if a leader is reacting too harshly or saying something or making moves or doing things, could really jeopardize their position of power. Not to mention the fact that, the 10th house does represent the leader of a particular country. So this is going to represent something's going on with a leader. Well, many of you guys may not know this, but the Israeli prime minister recently had a heart attack, okay, apparently. And so I'm looking at Mercury being losses and health and being behind closed doors. It retrogrades in the 10th house over Pluto and over the moon. This could represent people really calling for there to be some major change revolving around leadership in Israel, and whether or not they feel like that whoever is making the calls or, whatever with what's going on with the conflict and the war, because Mercury is tied to Mars, that, there's going to be some people who are going to be like, what is going on? So what we're really going to want to watch it's probably going to be the full moon, around August 8th. We're probably going to want to watch when Mercury is stationing, because it's going to spend 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days with Mercury conjunct the moon. The losses, the effects, the changes that are happening with, potentially the powers in Israel. So we'll have to see what happens. I mean, just to be honest with you guys, I looked at Iran's chart. I'm not really seeing much. I've got this for April 1st, 79, so it's Sag rising with the sun in Aries and the moon in Taurus. Most of what's been happening has been more like Uranus on their moon. Uranus getting ready to go in the 7th house. Certainly, we're still feeling the effects of eclipses that have been happening in Aries, retrogrades that have been happening in Aries. Saturn and Neptune going through the 4th house, kind of like, isolating things, dissolving things, a lot of secrecy revolving around what's going on with land. Probably the bigger transits are not even really tied to the Mercury retrograde. The bigger transits are going to be tied to the fact that when Mercury retrogrades, Mercury is retrograding technically in the 8th house of Iran's chart, whole sign 9. So a change in relationships with foreigners. And it's the ruler of Mars, which will be still in conjunction to their Saturn and also conjunct the South Node. Well, Mars happens to rule Iran's, 12th house. So that can also be talking about losses or something changing revolving around leadership or someone or something being taken out or removed from a position of power. So that comes up, but I'm not seeing some of the same conjunction degrees that we're seeing with some of the other charts that I've mentioned. But still, I'm not going to take away from the fact that the Mars South Node, midheaven stuff is definitely going to be like a fiery, kind of end to a potential, reign of power. And I'm really going to be watching what's happening around the end of July as the moon is hitting the South Node and there's a reactivation of the eclipse that we actually had in March of this year. Perhaps maybe this is going to be the change, if the South Node Mars is, relinquishing missiles or, de-arming or talking about certain leaders stepping down or people being removed. Certainly, there's a lot of echoing voices of people saying, well, there needs to be, denuclearization. Okay. And then people are saying there needs to be regime change, which I feel like this is something we've heard a lot in recent years. When you think about what's happened in Iraq and other places, it may not necessarily be the smartest move, but it does look like there is going to be some kind of push from foreign allies for there to actually be some changes revolving around who's running the country. So these are going to be the heavy hitters. Obviously, my advice is for everybody who's watching when it comes to your own life, in ways, I think, to kind of like navigate these transits. Obviously, the next 2 days are going to be the best days for you guys to be focusing on kind of preparing for the Mercury retrograde shadows. Let me put this back on 0 Aries. There we go. Okay. That means that, whether you're doing this now or this is going to be something that you're deciding to do during the Mercury retrograde period, This could be things like reviewing creative projects, right? So if you like write scripts, if you work on artwork, if you have pitches, or maybe you're focusing on reworking like a launch of some kind, you do that during the Mercury retrograde. Double check your communication. So emails, texts, contracts might go kind of a little haywire. So proofread and clarify things if necessary. Reflect on what you love. Focus on authenticity. Maybe journal about it and express your true self and kind of where you've been holding yourself back or where you've been kind of dimming your light. Definitely back up your tech. Whether it's, your iClouds or your phone or your computer or whatever. Watch for potential information of data breaches and stuff like that that's going to be coming up, because I do anticipate that we will see either more information on the most recent data hack and the breach that we had, the big one that went across like Apple and Google and a bunch of things where we just save our passwords in our browsers. Yeah, those got hacked. So we might be finding out more about that, how that impacts us. Because we know Mercury retrograde really loves tech glitches. So save your work, save it often, keep copies of it. And more importantly, embrace flexibility. Delays, I think, are a part of the process. So we're going to kind of go with the flow and maybe prepare by kind of like, clearing your schedule for major launches or maybe signings until after this period is over, after August 11th. And we can really focus on the inner work until then. Now, as for who this is going to affect the most, like I said, my Gemini and my Virgo risings, you guys are ruled by Mercury. So it's going to impact you a lot, because it's your chart ruler. So it's going to really amplify the effects on your identity as well as your routines. Leo risings, you guys will feel this deeply as Mercury moves retrograde through your first house. So maybe spotlighting your voice, maybe making some changes to your appearance. Just make sure you check your natal chart, because not all predictions are going to hit exactly. This is where knowing your chart is going to be really important. If you have any personal planets in Leo from about 3 to 16 degrees, this is going to be spicing things up just a little bit. Now, I'd love to give you guys some insight as to where Mercury is entering into the sign of Leo. I'm going to be talking about what houses Mercury rules and what to watch for as Mercury is going to be changing signs. Now, I'm a Western astrologer. I like to focus on whole signs. That's my go-to. So you're going to make the most of my predictions by listening to your whole sign rising chart first. So listen to your rising sign. That's going to tell you what part of your life you're going to see Mercury kind of entering into, what it might be kind of bringing up, reorganizing for you, or where you're kind of having some setbacks or some delays. So you understand why that's happening. But you can also listen to, and you should listen to your sun sign, because Mercury is going through the sign of Leo, which is connected to the sun. So a lot of people may actually feel like they really resonate with the sun sign predictions. And you can also listen to your moon sign and how that connects and correlates with you emotionally. So choose your own adventure. And you can listen to whole sign, or you can listen to Placidus. So if you're a Placidus user, you're going to have to see which houses are going to be about that 15 through 4 degrees. Okay? All right, so here's your predictions, themes, and tips for the 12 rising signs. We're going to start with Aries and Aries rising. What's up, Aries? All right, Aries, Mercury will be retrograding, okay, in your 5th house. However, the retrograde is not going to start for a couple weeks. So something to think about before we kind of get into that period is, what is the 5th house for you? Well, you should have a pretty good idea. Mars spent a lot of time there recently, your chart ruler. The 5th house is a fire sign like you, and I think you're going to benefit because you're going to see Mercury off and on in a trine to Saturn and Neptune in your 1st house of self. Mercury rules the mind, communication, short distance trips, vehicles, learning and writing, as well as organization, scheduling, work, your to-do list, and your health. So my thought is with Mercury moving into your 5th house, well, your mind is going to be focused on having fun, being creative, right? Dancing, playing, dating, kind of sharing your, I guess, creativity with the world. And it can really light up romance as well. Communication, meeting people on apps, meeting people while you travel. It could be also about learning more about creative hobbies, making time for maybe fitness that feels like fun. And I think for a lot of you guys, you just want to think about what happened last summer. Also, what's been happening with the Mars retrograde, what's been going on back and forth with either your joy, your dating, your kids, or a creative project or venture. Maybe revisit a passion project and, old flames can come back. Sure, that can happen. They can text you, they can call you because it is your 3rd house ruler. really avoid impulsive romantic communication, because there could be little flings that can happen, and there could be a sense of talking to somebody and then you change your mind or you kind of lose interest. But it is a good time for like creative writing projects, blogging, maybe even like working on creative writing or anything revolving around making the time to do the things that you love to do, right? All right, well, hopefully that's helpful. I'll catch back with you when Mercury turns retrograde next month. We've got Leo and Leo rising. What's up, Leo? What am I saying? We've got Taurus and Taurus rising. What's up, Taurus? I hope you're doing well. My mind is on Leo, sorry. You're going to be seeing Mercury turning retrograde in your natal 4th house. But before that happens in 2 weeks, you got a little bit of time to kind of tap into what Mercury is trying to tell you here. So Taurus, the 4th house is your home. It's your family. It has to do with finances, money, personal possessions, and resources, as well as anything connecting to 5th house. So children, romance, creative projects, having fun. So the fact that Mercury is entering into the 4th house really tells me that your home and family is becoming active. More chatty, more communication, more visiting. Maybe it's going to be about investing in, an entertainment area of your home, having fun at home, visiting with friends, visiting with family. And family talks may need revisiting in the coming weeks. This is because Mercury will turn retrograde in July. So some of you guys might be rethinking, do we want to refinish our kitchen? Do we want to move to a new apartment? Do we need to get into a bigger space? Are kids moving back home? Are you thinking about maybe creating a creative space at home? That kind of stuff. So I would advise you guys, you got to sign leases. You got to start looking for a place. You want to do it now. If you're thinking about like using the Mercury retrograde maybe to fix up a place before you sell it and you move, that's another option. But certainly asking yourself, am I happy here? Do I enjoy where I'm living? That's going to be a huge piece of the puzzle. So clarify intentions in regards to home and family to avoid misunderstandings. Try to watch out for big budget purchases that might be happening revolving around the home and family. Okay, so that's something else to think about, Taurus. Good luck. We've got Gemini and Gemini rising. What's up, Gem? You're going to be experiencing Mercury retrograde in Leo in your 3rd house. Obviously, I know it's your favorite time of the year when your chart ruler turns retrograde. So your Mercury, wherever Mercury goes, is where you are. But Mercury will go retrograde for a few weeks. So something to start thinking about is Mercury is about to enter into Leo in your natal 3rd house. Good news is this is a house where communication can really shine. Mercury loves being in this house. Mercury is not just tied to you, your body, your actions, and your appearance, but it's also connected to your home, your family, and anything revolving around your roots. So as Mercury is moving into the 3rd house, traveling, looking for a home, short distance trips, changes to vehicles, leases, contracts revolving around home, communicating with family, these can be the themes that can be kind of coming up for you over the next couple of weeks. Now, I would be really focused on, is my car sound? Am I backing up my technology stuff? Am I potentially going to be experiencing some travel hiccups? Maybe. So my recommendation is slow down, proofread everything before you're deciding to buy a car or buy a plane ticket or sign a lease or buy a house. These are things where you really need to look through the fine print, especially because Mercury will oppose Pluto, which tells me that there's either going to be some challenges that need to be worked on, or there could be some legal matters, or there could be some scheduling changes that can happen. But in the meantime, I think that you can kind of prepare for this, especially if you need to have any important conversations or make any travel plans. Try if you can to get that done this week, and let me know how it goes. So I'll catch you guys on the next one. All right, we got Cancer and Cancer rising. What's up, Cancer? Mercury's entering into Leo, into your 2nd house, which deals with your self-esteem, money, resources, values, your spending power. And Mercury's tied to the 12th house of things that are unforeseen or unexpected, and it's also directly tied to the 3rd house of communication, short distance trips, travels, learning, gadgets, siblings. So in a couple weeks, Mercury will go retrograde in your 2nd house. So this can definitely bring a change in direction when it comes to your money or your finances, your personal goals, when it comes to your resources or your self-esteem. But before that happens, you have a little bit of time. And honestly, you have some really nice aspects because Mercury will be trining Saturn and Neptune in your career house. So it looks to me like part of what's going on for you is that you're going to be really focusing on your self-worth. That's going to be highlighted. Maybe you're reviewing budgets or contracts. There can be a sense of, figuring out a budget, trying to stick to it. Also thinking about, okay, where is my money going, or where is a financial situation going? Trying to kind of work out the details or finding ways to be able to kind of navigate some changes that are going on with your resources at this time. Now, hopefully there aren't any money changes, but if there aren't any money changes, it's going to be revolving around how do I feel about myself? How am I meditating on abundance? How can I be improving my self-esteem? How can I be learning to kind of believe in myself? My advice is really trust your value and really focus on negotiations. So I do think that you have the opportunity to really lean into some of the sextiles with Mars in your third house, negotiate anything, renegotiate a contract, try to work out a deal with somebody, find a way to be able to get your bases covered so you feel like you can thrive at this time. Good luck. We've got Leo and Leo rising. Hope you're doing well, Leo. You're going to have Mercury retrograde in your first house. So this is going to be very personal for you. If you guys didn't already hear me talk about this in your July horoscopes, you got to go and check it out because I was like, no major haircuts. And it's funny because there's a lot of people who are like, don't say that we all have a mane. And then there were some people that are like, no, I chopped my hair off last summer and I hated it. So I don't know. The astrology still seems to be kind of doing what it does. But Mercury in a nutshell, going into your first house means that there's going to be more of a focus and an emphasis on communication, right? Relaying, something, talking to people, connecting with people, particularly socially and within groups. So it can be networks you're joining, being more vocal on social media, maybe spending time with your friends. And it is connected to your second house of money, resources, values. So you might be more vocal about what I want, what I have, what I need, what my goals are, what I'm trying to accomplish. And this is also about boosting your self-esteem. Now, the one thing that I would say is you've got a couple weeks before Mercury goes retrograde, but you're one of the signs that you're going to want to watch because the shadow will definitely impact you as it starts opposing Pluto, and it can kind of kick up some drama when it comes to communication with relationships or partners. You'll have to kind of put on your thinking cap, think about what happened in recent months when you had the Mars retrograde or even last year when you had Mercury retrograde. Bottom line is that the first house is what we do first thing in the morning. So getting up, going for a walk, getting up and doing some mindfulness practices, maybe doing some affirmations about wealth, about health, also about your confidence would be beneficial. Be cautious and be careful revolving around, making big changes to your appearance. This is more about your voice taking center stage, but watch for some potential missteps. Maybe reflect before publicly speaking, really think about, how much money you're spending, and also what you're eating or consuming. It could also mean that there are some changes that are going to be happening to your personal style. Keep in mind that Mars is connected to the Mercury retrograde, as is the South Node, so there can be a tendency to jump all in to be making a big style change that could be quite an investment or a commitment, only to change directions during the retrograde and realize you don't like it. Try things out that are temporary. Maybe, buy a few pieces, see if you like it before you really make the jump, and invest in yourself more than anything. Okay, Leo? Good luck. All right, we got Virgo and Virgo rising. What's up, Virgo? You're in the trenches with Gemini and Leo. So your chart ruler is about to turn retrograde in a couple weeks. But before that happens, you got a little bit of time to kind of come up with a game plan. But honestly, I think it's going to be a little bit more mellow for you guys. Mercury is going to be going into Leo in your 12th house, where your chart ruler is really focusing on your subconscious. Resting, sleeping, healing, traveling, maybe taking care of some creative projects behind closed doors, maybe having some alone time or some time to really practice some kind of spiritual practice or mindfulness technique would be really good for you guys. Now, this can also really impact your dreams. Mercury retrograde in the 12th house is notorious for bringing up some very symbolic dreams or some visions, especially in meditation. But Mercury doesn't just rule your first house of self. It's connected to the 10th house of career. So it can tell me there's like a process going on where you're reevaluating whether or not you're going to change jobs, if there's a change going on behind closed doors, if you're kind of positioning yourself maybe to end one thing, start something new, or kind of like control things from, behind the scenes. Mercury is also directly connected to Uranus getting ready to go into your 10th house of career. So if there's one thing I can tell you is work stuff, status stuff is about to change. You could be having more than one job. You could be juggling something part-time. You could be working full-time and trying to launch another business. Mercury is also directly tied to Mars and the South Node in your sign. So when in doubt, sleep on it is my advice for Virgo and Virgo risings. Old fears can surface that need healing. And I would say if you're meditating or if you are taking time alone to be creative in the sun or even in nature, it can be beneficial for you. Take care of your health and watch for some changes that can be happening with your sleep schedule. And don't count your chickens before they hatch, because there's a lot of things that you're visualizing or dreaming or manifesting to come to be, but it's not here yet. And this would be a wonderful time to do some vision boarding. Okay, get creative with it. Good luck. We've got Libra and Libra rising. What's up, Libra? You're going to experience Mercury going into the sign of Leo. It'll be moving through your natal 11th house, which deals with socializing goals, friends, and also, I think, like network opportunities. Okay, so the 11th house is your audience. So if you have an audience, or if you have people that you collaborate or you connect with, or simply just, your friends, it could be that. Mercury is tied to the 12th house of things that are hidden, subconscious, hidden enemies, and losses. It's also connected to the 9th house, which deals with your faith, philosophy, education, and travel. Well, Libra, Mercury will go retrograde in a couple of weeks. So something to think about is, is it time for you to, get more acclimated with a social group? Is it time to reconnect with friends? Are you revising or reviewing some of your personal goals? There can be parties, get-togethers, there could be reunions. The only thing that I would watch for is that there could be drama. When Mercury goes retrograde in your 11th house, there could be drama amongst friends or things that you can kind of get tied into. Now, in particular, I think because the sun is like ruling Mercury, it can be about recognition that you're getting at work. It could be also, some kind of new leadership role, and now you're having to reacclimate yourself with a group of people that you're working on. Maybe your professional goals are changing. And Mercury is also going to be tied to Mars in the South Node in your 12th house. So I'm anticipating for some Libra risings, as much as I don't like to say this, there's probably going to be some friendship drama. There's probably going to be somebody who's going to get cut from the friendship roster. Or somebody who you thought was your friend that come to find out they're not, and they're saying some things or doing some things that's working against you. I also think that it is possible that some Libra or Libra risings will have a change in a friendship that you'll experience while you're traveling. And so I don't know if it's like you travel and then you get into a squabble with a friend, or you're going to be traveling somewhere and then you hear that, that a friend is breaking up with you, or there's some dramatic loss of a friendship of some kind. So watch for that. As much as I hate to say that, that's kind of the vibe that I'm getting. And now is a good time to reevaluate and rethink just how you connect with other people, especially as Mercury is in opposition to Pluto. Now it's about how you create and you take it to a group of people. So asking people for feedback actually can be really beneficial for you. Just avoid the group drama, Libra. Good luck. We've got Scorpio and Scorpio rising. My Scorpios, you're going to be experiencing Mercury going into the sign of Leo, and this will be happening in your natal 10th house. Faint whispers of some of the Mercury and Mars retrograde. So now it's time to kind of make up your mind about what direction you're going in with a professional matter. Obviously, this is 10 signs away from you, Scorpio, so it does represent some kind of personal karma. The 10th house is your career. It's about your professional life, your reputation. So all eyes are on you in terms of communication at work. Now, in a couple of weeks, Mercury will turn retrograde. So this can mean that you could be changing jobs, going back to an old position, an old boss is calling you, realize you don't like a job, decide that you want to go back to work, or maybe it's time to take a break. Mercury is tied to your 11th house of goals, friends, and allies, as well as the 8th house, which deals with joint assets, money, and transformation. So it is possible for some Scorpio and Scorpio risings that you're going to get a call from somebody you used to work with, and they're going to be like, hey, do you want to reconnect? Do you want to do some work together? It's also possible that there could be some squabbles happening revolving around some work colleagues, and you're kind of like, I don't want to get in the middle of it. How do I deal with this necessary change that's kind of coming about in a professional matter? My advice is, your career will light up throughout this transit, especially because of the oppositions to Pluto. So a lot of Scorpio and Scorpio risings are like, man, I'm going through some really big changes emotionally or at home or when it comes to my family or in my private life. And truth be told, you will feel more so pressured, I think, than some of the other signs because Mercury is challenging you and it does represent change. So you're going to have to be talking to your friends, your groups, your people at work about what is changing, how much you can do at work, and where you might feel like you need to change direction, reschedule things, or take a step back. Career talks may need revision. Now is not the time to fully commit to a new long-term career. Now is not the time to launch a new business or make any big announcements. Use the Mercury retrograde time, I think, to kind of stay professional and know that some delays can happen, but it's helping you kind of rethink what you want to change about your professional kind of direction, who you're working with, and what your long-term goals really are. Good luck. We've got Sag and Sag rising. What's up, Sag? Your favorite time of the year. Mercury's going into the 9th house in the sign of Leo, in a fellow sister fire sign. And Sag and Sag risings, you guys are, especially the early degrees, going to have some fire trines. Mercury deals with communication connection, but in your chart, it deals with your 7th house of relationships, partnerships, and clients, and the 10th house of career, reputation, and anything revolving around your status. But when you find that Mercury goes into your 9th house, this can be a time where you're really feeling much more expansive. You're much more optimistic. Travel is highlighted. Study plans, definitely become a theme. Teaching, training, ceremonies, graduations, all of this stuff kind of comes up. So what's interesting for you guys is that, Mercury rules your relationship house and your status. And I could see a lot of Sag risings that are suddenly planning travel with a partner. Maybe they, go on a trip spontaneously and they meet somebody. Maybe some of you guys are suddenly eloping and you're planning weddings or destination, trips. Some of you guys might be sporadically separating with Uranus in your 7th and you need a lawyer. So it depends on your personal transits. But I look at this and I'm like, look, Mercury in the 9th house is ready for traveling. Unfortunately, Mercury will retrograde. And you're going to see that in a couple of weeks where you need to make sure you have bag tags. You need to make sure that you have trip insurance. You need to make sure that you've planned your trips early. Otherwise, you could have some changes with your flights, some delays, some changes with accommodations. And I think it's going to be out of your control because it's going to be opposing Pluto, which rules your 12th house. So I hope I'm wrong with Sag and Sag risings. My advice is just watch for the shifts that can happen with either study or travel plans. Double and triple check your itinerary. Know that because the sun is the dispositor of this retrograde and it's conjunct Jupiter, it's not going to be a make or break situation if something changes. Also, I feel like this can mean that you're a little bit more optimistic if you do have to make some arrangements revolving around travel. Also, there could be some people who could be helping you pay for the travel, or you might actually get reimbursed for things with the sun and Jupiter being in your 8th house. Or maybe you're traveling and somebody is saying, I need you to be here. I'll pay for it. I've got it covered. Your aunt, your mom, your sister, somebody goes, look, I just need you to be here. Here's the money for the ticket. And you're like, oh, I'm suddenly traveling and I didn't anticipate traveling. It works in your favor too because Mercury is connected to the 10th house. So it can be that you're telling some people, hey, I'm actually taking some time off of work. I'm going to be traveling for a little bit. I'm going to be away. Just make sure you remember to put up your away message. Make sure you cover all of your bases before you potentially hit the road. Good luck, Sag. You've got Capricorn and Capricorn rising. You guys are going to be experiencing Mercury going into the sign of Leo in your natal 8th house. For Capricorns, this is the house of intimacy. This is about shared resources, vulnerability, secrets, healing, psychological insights. And Mercury is directly tied to your daily routine, health, and habits, as well as your 9th house of personal beliefs, travel, and education. In a few weeks, Mercury will retrograde through your 8th house, where if you have been dealing with a bit of a setback or a delay with a tax matter or an inheritance matter or a settlement matter, especially with the 3rd and the 9th house kind of activated, if you have been dealing with a health issue or you're thinking about getting back into therapy, physical therapy, it can be emotional or psychological therapy, trauma, kind of assistance as well, that can come up. And if there are any changes to your work or your work schedule, that can definitely have you reworking your finances, your debt, or conversations with a partner about money. Now, deep talks may surface. Be honest, be tactful, especially when it comes to some of the things that are changing either with your health or with your work. I think the key here is to stay optimistic, a little challenging for money stuff, truth be told, because it will be opposing Pluto in your second house of personal resources. But where I think actually Mercury is going to kind of have your back is it will be trining Saturn and Neptune in your fourth house. And Saturn is your chart ruler. So to me, it looks more like expenses revolving around home matters, great time for like debt consolidation, refinancing, looking into lending or loans. It can take a little bit of time, but I do think that you can find something that can really work for you and for your situation. And if you're dealing with like a settlement or like a back and forth matter of joint expenses, it looks like this is going to be something that's finally going to get settled. Hopefully that's helpful for you, Capricorn. Let me know what happens. All right, we got Aquarius and Aquarius rising. You ready for this? Mercury is entering into your seventh house of relationships in your opposite sign, Leo. Mercury is directly tied to your fifth house of children, creativity, and romance, along with the eighth house of things that are more hidden, secretive, sensitive, and it's about intimacy and vulnerability. Now, your seventh house is your relationship house, and you've had quite a few retrogrades here over the last year where you've had a back and forth situation or a reassessment or a reevaluation of those who are closest to you, and be that your therapist, your spouse, your relationship with your kids, Leo, even your astrologer, or people who kind of give you advice. So I look at this and I'm like, all right, obviously Mercury retrograde in the seventh house is kind of like that textbook, okay, kind of reworking communication and relationships. It is possible in a couple of weeks that partnerships, agreements, they need clarity, or you need to be going a little bit deeper in how you're connecting with people who are closest to you. Exes can call from the past, but Mercury is tied to the fifth house, so it means that you could be hearing back from people who you kind of saw casually, and like now it can become more real. It can also mean for existing relationships, you're just finding better ways to connect, especially with some of those oppositions to Pluto, or maybe there's been some tension in recent oppositions between you and other people. But I'm optimistic that some of the trines between Mercury and Saturn can actually help you listen and work through some of the relational things that can be coming up. Saturn is one of your planetary rulers, as is Uranus, where Mercury will be sextiling as well. I think for a lot of Aquarius risings, this is about finding ways to get back into dating if you're single, being open, keeping an open mind, and existing relationships, finding ways to bring the passion and the creativity and the flair back. Date nights, finding ways to maybe get away from the kids. This can also be in certain relationships talking about the future of commitment and what that looks like, if it means marriage or children or more children. And I would just say, listen as much as you speak during this transit. I think it's really going to give you a lot of clarity about relationships and a lot of feedback about what you are personally changing to kind of better harmonize and work with other people. Okay? Good luck, Aquarius. Let me know what happens. And finally, we have Pisces and Pisces rising. What's up, Pisces? Mercury will be turning retrograde in a few short weeks, and it will be entering into the sign of Leo in your sixth house. Now, the sixth house deals with work and health, pets, your to-do list, your office space, going to the gym, going to the doctor. And Mercury is tied to relationships, and it's also tied to the past or home and family. If there's one thing I kind of get from this transit with Uranus going here, it's going to be about getting your home in order, or organizing things in your home, or organizing a home office, or figuring out your work schedule revolving around a moving schedule, or getting help or assistance in home and family matters. Now, this can also mean that your relationships with coworkers, your habits, your healthcare workers, your pets are kind of under some kind of like reworking period. But when you have Mercury going into this sign, it's going to have you focus on your health and your habits. Now, these routines in a couple weeks when Mercury turns retrograde, they may need tweaking. So it might be a good time to say, you know what, it's actually time to organize, the office drawers. let's clean out the kitchen. You know, maybe it's time to look for a new job. Maybe I should go back to the gym. Oh, I'm going to schedule, you know, a dental appointment, that kind of thing. And you guys might also find that it's about working your schedule revolving around home or family care. So it might mean there are some things that are worth spending money on, like, you know, having somebody come and clean the house or, you know, do the yard work, fold the laundry. It can also mean that you're helping take care of a home or family matter. Or if you need somebody to help you kind of work on your house or sell your house, this could be a time that you're thinking about it as well. However, family relationships and romantic relationships seem like they're going to be under construction. So, you know, organize tasks to avoid overwhelm, know when to ask for help, and realize that there can be a little bit of like nitpicking or being a little bit more critical in relationships. And that can be business relationships with coworkers, romantic relationships one-on-one, or relationships that you have with family members. What I do like is that throughout this transit, the sun is very close to Jupiter, which is one of your rulers. So you're optimistic about how you're going to tackle some of these things. You're going to get creative with it. I also think with Saturn and Neptune trining Mercury, it's about building confidence, believing in yourself, that you can make the necessary changes in your job, in your habits, and you're really willing to take your health seriously. Mercury can be about health, and I'm looking at like eclipses in the North Node that's in your first house, and definitely it's really important for you to make the necessary changes with your health and your habits, so that way you can feel like you're totally committed to yourself and you're the best version of yourself, okay? All right, so you got a couple weeks until that happens, Pisces. Let me know what happens. All right, guys. Well, that's your guide to Mercury and Leo. Obviously, probably more than a preview of the Mercury retrograde. That's basically a Mercury retrograde video, so you got a little early. This is a cosmic invitation really to refine our voices and I think shine authentically, to live more kind of heart-centered, and hopefully it doesn't stir up too much drama. So we'll see. I love putting these videos out early, way in advance, so you guys can see some of my predictions and see how it manifests. I'll do a part 2, and if you want any more information about your rising sign, check out my July horoscopes. They're live on the channel. Do me a favor, like this video, subscribe to my videos down below, click the bell button so you're alerted as to when I'm here. I'm here every Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday using tarot and astrology to make sense of what's going on in the cosmos. Share your rising sign and what you've noticed during the past Mercury and Mars retrograde. You're going to see some deja vu. I'd love to hear how you guys are prepping for this up and coming retrograde in the comments. Use the next couple of days to get your commitments in order with trines between the moon as well as Mercury and Saturn and Neptune and Aries. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more astrology goodness. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys back here on Friday. I'm going to be doing some live tarot readings. Yeah, tarot readings. 4 o'clock Pacific time, 6 o'clock p.m. Central, and then it'll be 7 p.m. Eastern. Check my community tab. I'll post the link there, and I will see you guys for my live readings. Come and hang out. It's always fun. I'll see you in my next video. Until then, keep roaring, and I'll see you soon. Take care.